So East Carolina brings in a new offensive coordinator to lead this Pirates offense in 2024, and John David Baker. He was previously the co-offensive coordinator at Ole Miss. Can you describe the type of offense he plans to run here in 2024?
The biggest thing is the tempo. I mean, Donnie Kirkpatrick, the previous offensive coordinator, had success in previous years, and until this past year, obviously, which I'm sure we'll get into. But I mean, they needed to make a change. Like it had just gotten kind of stale. They lost a lot of personnel after the 22 season, and going into last year, the hope was it wouldn't be a rebuild, but it ended up being that. They missed on the quarterbacks they recruited, and then they didn't really do much to disguise what they were trying to do at times. No tempo at all. Not a ton of variation in the run game. So Mike Houston, who traditionally has been a pretty conservative offensive coach. I mean, he's got a defensive background, so he's gone with a conservative offense. Used to run the triple option at his previous stops. He wanted to go with kind of a, I don't want to say reckless, but certainly a wide open, air raid ish style. A lot of tempo, spread formation. Maybe even some wider splits on the offensive line. So that's the direction they're going in. Obviously, it's kind of a hybrid with his time at Ole Miss. John David Baker, he does run a lot of that stuff as well. But he's also got ties to, the true air raid days. So I think it's going to be kind of a combination of both of those.
So let's get to the position where it all starts on offense, and that's with the quarterback. Their starters from 2023, Alex Flynn graduates and Mason Garcia transfers to Austin Peay. They brought in Jake Garcia from Missouri and Caitlin Hauser from Michigan State. How did this battle shape up in the spring?
They added Caitlin Hauser first, and I think most kind of expected him to be the favorite for the job, and I still consider him the favorite. Then they added Garcia like right before the winter semester because the main thing they wanted to do was they didn't want to hand the job to somebody without them earning it. And I think going into spring, most expected a pretty tight competition. Caden Hauser didn't do anything to hurt himself. He was really good. It's just that I think Jake Garcia was maybe even better than ECU thought he would be. And it was a really good competition. I mean, the main thing is, and I know it's coach speak to say these guys are neck and neck. Can't really name a starter, but I watched a lot of practices and I agree. I watched the scrimmages and I felt like both guys were really good. Major upgrade over Mason Garcia and Alex Flynn. No disrespect to those guys, but these guys have real arm talent. They have leadership qualities. They come from programs where they expect to win. I know Hauser obviously didn't have a lot of success at Michigan State, but he was in a brutal situation last year as a first-time starter, but he was on a really good prep team coming out of high school. So these guys come here, they expect to win. They also expect to be the starter. So you've got two guys, former highly touted recruits, that are really going at it. I think one of them will emerge midway through preseason camp, and they'll name a starter then. And I do know they want to get to a point where there's an established guy and not rotate them. We'll see if that ends up being the case come the season opener. But, I think it's really neck and neck right now going into preseason camp between Hauser and Garcia.
If you're the head coach today, who are you putting out there for snap one? Not saying they come out snap two, but who you put out there for snap one?
I'm going with Hauser. I just think the one thing I like about his game is I think he's a little bit better. Like if they kind of get off schedule, so to speak, offensively, like if it's second long or maybe his first read isn't there, I think he's a little bit better of an improviser, and ECU historically does not have the best offensive line, so it's not always going to be how you draw it up. And I think you need some improvisation in this offense. I think Hauser brings a little bit more upside there, but Garcia is definitely capable too.
Raheem Jeter was an exciting freshman they brought in before the 2023 season. What can you tell us about his development, and do you think he has a role in the future for the Pirates offense?
I think he's definitely a guy to watch down the line. I would say right now he's pretty clearly behind the other two as a redshirt freshman. Still 4 years of eligibility left. I would say he's definitely number 3. He has grown a lot compared to when he first came in. I mean, he was pretty raw. Big, strong athlete. Just has to really kind of continue to refine his mechanics, and playing in this offense, I think, is a little bit of a different beast for him. So I like him long term. I think he's a guy, along with some of the quarterbacks they have coming in the future after Garcia, after Hauser. But he's definitely, the thing I like about him is he's kind of that natural leader too. Like he played for a really good Spartanburg program in South Carolina. He's a winner traditionally. So I think he's a guy that can lead your program in time for sure.
Moving over to the running game, East Carolina, I mean, going back, as we saw in those highlights in the intro video, they have a great history there at running back. But last season, the running game was pretty much non-existent. They lost Gerald Green and Kamaro Edmonds to the portal, but they do bring back their top two running backs from a year ago, and Javius Bond and Rahaj Harris, as well as Marlon Gunn Jr. How did the running backs look in the spring?
The running backs look good. I still think that offensively, like the passing game was the major plus in the spring because they were still, they're doing a lot more in the run game this year. And Rajay Harris was out for the spring. He had a wrist injury, so he was like just kind of a walk-through guy, held out of contact. Rajay Harris is kind of the question mark because as a freshman, he was an all-rookie AAC selection. Looked like he was going to be like the next guy. Instead, Keaton Mitchell ended up becoming that guy. Obviously, he's with the Ravens now, got hurt last year, but he ended up being back-to-back 1,000-yard rusher. Rajay was a little more inconsistent. Then he tore his knee in 2022 and was really just not himself early part of last year. Now, the season finale against Tulsa, he looked explosive, like he was back. And there was a lot of uncertainty over whether or not he would hit the portal going in his final year of eligibility. He comes back. I think he's kind of the presumed starter. I think the running back room is more talented than what the numbers last year say. The offense was just so bad. There was no passing game, no downfield threat. Like Javius Bond to me can be, maybe not this year, but in time, like an all-conference type of guy. Like he's got that speed and explosiveness, and I think Marlon Gunn is just really solid, kind of a power back. So I like that three-headed monster. Of course, as you guys know, you just got to keep him healthy. But I think all three of those guys are good enough to succeed in this offense.
What can you tell us about freshman TJ Engelman and maybe describe his game to us?
I like TJ a lot. I think he's just young. He did get in early as a freshman, which helps. Definitely think he's a guy that has a chance to make an impact even this year. The toughest thing with him, and I like his mindset because he kind of comes in confident, but he played quarterback in high school a lot. So he's one of those guys that's still kind of figuring out the running back position, but I think like has the natural quickness, movement skills to really kind of make an impact in time. So I like TJ. I think he's probably fourth or fifth in line this year, though.
Is Bond fully recovered from the leg injury he suffered in 2023?
He is. He had a good spring. He does to me. He still has to prove he can be durable because like when he gets hit pretty hard, he seems a little shaken. And again, last year he was a true freshman, so like you kind of expect that. Second year in the program, he's got the most upside in the room. I don't think there's any question about it, especially in this offense. So to me, he's got to prove he can handle instead of like 10 touches a game, maybe 15 plus, and then you have more potential for explosives, which this offense I think is going to need from the running back. So he's healthy now. I do think he's got to prove though he can kind of take the pounding of a running back position.
Recently, they got a commitment from London Montgomery coming over from Penn State. What do you make of that? Is that like a depth move? You think he might be part of the rotation, or?
I think I would classify it as a guy. I would say like depth move on the surface, but kind of a wild card, like in terms of long term. I mean, anytime you add a Penn State running back, like you feel pretty good about that. I don't think Penn State's taking a bunch of, guys who can't tote the football pretty well with their recruiting grounds. So, like on the surface, you expect him to be pretty good. Now he hasn't played at all. He's a redshirt freshman, second year of college. He's another guy that was coming off a knee injury his senior year of high school. And I always say, like, the second year back for those big knee injuries is typically when you see the player return to form. So he's kind of in that mix along with TJ where he's more of a wild card. I think Marlon Gunn, Rajay, and Bond are going to be your top three guys. But you're going to need four at least to get through a season, if not five. So I think he'll play. It's just a matter of how much.
Do you expect? I'm assuming the answer is yes, but can we expect increased production here in 2024 compared to what we saw last year?
I'd be shocked. I mean, to be honest, guys, I haven't looked at the offensive stats since the season ended last year because they were so disgusting. Like it was the worst. It was the most painful thing to watch, and like they've from a personnel standpoint, and honestly, outside of the running backs and Chase Sowell and a few of the offensive linemen, it's been a complete reboot, staff down, to players. So like, I think we'll see a much better running game this year. Is it going to be the best in the American or college football? I highly doubt it, but I think they'll be much better.
Given all the depth they have, you think it's going to be a kind of a running back by committee where we're going to see a lot of playing time for the top three guys, so to speak?
I think so. I think Mike Houston, and again, this is a little bit of a different offense, but I think he's going to want to. He likes to get three guys involved consistently. So I do think last year they almost like over scripted the running back rotation, like they tried too hard. So I do, if one to get into a rhythm, I would like to see them ride the hot hand a little bit more. And I think with the new offensive staff, you'll see that. But I think you'll see it by committee. Rajay is the one where he's got the build to be an every down back. He can catch it, block. He's got the wiggle to do that, but he's got to prove he can get back to that kind of freshman, sophomore status.
The passing game lost Jalen Johnson and Josiah Hatfield to graduation, but brought back their leading receiver from 2023 and breakout freshman Chase Sowell, as well as transfers Winston Wright Jr. from Florida State and Anthony Smith from NC State. How did this room shape up in the spring?
It was definitely one of the bright spots of the offense. I mean, the spring game, and Chase Sowell actually missed some time this spring. So, like, you kind of know what you have coming back there. You feel good about it. I mean, for him to put up, 600 yards in that crap offense, like, it was, like, honestly a miracle. So, I think he'll be pretty good in this offense, if not really good. And the first few plays of the spring game, it was like touchdown, 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 which was exciting. It was almost like they scripted it that way. Big touchdowns to Anthony Smith. Keelan Robinson made some plays who didn't really play a whole lot last year. And then Winston Wright made some plays. So, Smith didn't play a ton at State, but his yards per catch were way up there. His speed, he's a take the top off the defense type guy, whereas Winston Wright was an all-conference guy at West Virginia. So I know he had a bad injury at Florida State, but they feel good about that room. There were a few other guys, down on the depth chart that just didn't get a lot of chances because, the offense went 3 and out or just couldn't do anything last year. So, they feel the room, again, similar to running back, is much more talented than what the numbers may suggest on paper.
We talked about Chase Sowell leading this team in receiving a year ago, and there's been some positive buzz around Winston Wright in the spring. Who do you view as the go-to wide receiver in this offense?
That's a good question. I would say it has to be Sowell because he's kind of established. But with basically a new quarterback room, I think it kind of is to be determined. I would say, typically your slot guy is your most volume target guy. So Winston Wright makes sense there. I think if you had to line it up today, Sowell, Wright, and Anthony Smith would be your starting receivers. But don't sleep on Keelan Robinson. I don't think he ends up being a high volume target guy, but I think he's an impact. And then, Jari Patterson's kind of the guy who's been overlooked. He's a backup slot to Winston Wright, but he had a huge spring too and could make an impact. But I would say probably between Sowell and Winston Wright as of today.
So East Carolina lost starting tight end Shane Calhoun off to Texas A&M, but they were able to bring in Casey Kelly from Oregon and Javante Connor from Ole Miss. Can you describe how the tight ends are going to be utilized in this new offense?
It'll be a lot of one tight end sets for the most part. And so that's kind of what, led to Shane Calhoun's departure. Casey Kelly had been with John David Baker at Ole Miss when Baker was a tight ends coach. So you had that connection. And then Calhoun, who was an established guy, had to miss the spring because of an injury. So not that he was a bad teammate at all, great guy. Most Pirate fans love Shane. I think he was like, I don't want to get out there and not play a whole lot in what's probably going to be a lot of 11 personnel. So I think Kelly's going to be your starter, but I like the room a lot. Javante Connor from Ole Miss, again, you got the JDB connection. He was added post-spring, but he's got huge upside. And then they bring back a couple of guys. Desirio Riles played a lot as a freshman last year after Calhoun got hurt. And then the guy who took a huge step in the spring, Tyler Savage, really out of nowhere, kind of has been up and down with injuries, hybrid tight end, receiver guy. He had a huge spring with Shane hurt and Kelly kind of banged up towards the end. So, again, you feel pretty good 4 deep there at tight end. It's just I would expect Kelly to be the guy because of his experience in this offense. And then I just don't know if they, I don't think they have a difference maker at the position, but I think they got solid guys across the board.
The offensive line returns a lot of production in 2024. The biggest loss to this O-line was their right tackle, Owen Murphy, who graduated last year. How did this group look in the spring?
They look better. I still think this is the biggest question mark offensively. Like, they return players, and a lot of them were kind of playing new positions last year. And I felt like the biggest thing that hindered them last season was just like they were so predictable offensively. And if you're not a great offensive line and you're playing new positions and you're pretty predictable offensively and you're slow to get to the ball and kind of let the defense dictate the game, you're going to get exposed. They got exposed a lot last year. But the good news is, they returned those guys, and now the offense should be more on the attack. When you're in tempo and you're throwing the ball more instead of trying to be a smash mouth team, which ECU was at times last year, to no success. I think it's a better fit for the personnel. Parker Moore really struggled at left tackle the first half of last year because he had always played on the right side. He's now back at left tackle for his second straight year. He looked a million times better in the spring. Dustin Hall, who in my opinion is more of a center, he played more guard last year. He's now back at center. You've got an offensive line coach in Matt Maddox who knows this offense in and out. The interior guys, they added some transfers who they feel good about. And then, right tackle is the big question mark for me. You just don't know who's going to start there right now based on, like you said, Murphy graduating. But I think the unit has a chance to be better for sure. It's just how good are they going to be and how much can the offense, the scheme kind of mask their potential issues.
If you had to pick an offensive breakout type player here in 2024, who would that be?
Any position?
Yeah, any position on offense.
Yeah.
Offensive line. Anybody.
I mean, if I'm going to have to pick an offensive line breakout position, that would be a challenge. But I'd tell you what, there's plenty of candidates. I'll go Jari Patterson. I mentioned him earlier. I think he's just kind of a guy who's like not really being talked about a lot. He's a former walk-on transfer from Marshall. He's now been in the program like 3 or 4 years. He's a scholarship guy. He's been a scholarship guy for a couple of years. And I think Winston Wright will be a player, as will the other 2 guys. But I think Patterson in this offense, he's got kind of that skill set to where you can not only utilize him in the slot, but you can use him in motion, do some jet sweeps. And he just was not utilized well, in my opinion, last year. Whereas this scheme, I think, fits him much better. And I expect him to make some explosive plays as well. So I'll go Jari Patterson.